Stephen A.
Yes.
Was this a Chiefs comeback or an Eagles collapse?
Well, I definitely think it was a Chiefs comeback. I got to give credit where credit is due. The fact of the matter is Patrick Mahomes sit up there and injured his ankle with less than 2 minutes left in the first half. They were down 24-14 at half. They scored 21 of the next 24 points after halftime, scored, and ultimately outscored them 24-11 in the second half. It was a collective effort, make no mistake about it. The Chiefs defense was able to neutralize the Philadelphia Eagles to some degree. I thought Jalen Hurts was playing phenomenal football, with the exception of the one turnover that gave Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs 7 points. We can't ignore that and the impact that that had on this game. But when you look at the way Patrick Mahomes was playing, when you look at the play calling, particularly with the whip routes, not on one but two occasions that Andy Reid called along with Eric Bieniemy, when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles in man-to-man coverage when clearly you should have been in the zone and whatever, we can point to a lot of things, but in the end, it comes down to Andy Reid being a superior coach to Nick Sirianni in the second half, and Patrick Mahomes being that superstar that he is, that everybody in the NFL is looking up to.
You can call it a comeback. It was a comeback. Now, the Eagles aided in it. And where was their defense?
Yeah.
All week long, I know I listened to people who know particularly about the defensive end of this.
That's right.
Talk about the Eagles and what it is they needed to do. Right. You cannot give Patrick Mahomes that kind of time, but yet, forget about sacks. Where were the pressures? Where were the hurries? Where were the hits maybe early in the game? Even if you took a 15-yarder, you don't want to do that. But the Eagles had to set a tone there. Mm-hmm. The other night, we got a chance to talk to the great gold jacket wearing one, Richard Dent.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And what was he saying? Richard was talking about that defense, his own defense, maybe the greatest of all time, and the Eagles being able to pressure like that with four people. They didn't pressure like that. They didn't dial up anything.
That's right.
This is where I think it's fair to go to coaching. Even though I'm being critical of the Eagles defense, it's a comeback. Patrick Mahomes was so great. When he threw that helmet off Ryan and had that agony on his face, in that moment, you think, this thing could be done.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can't sort of steady himself and he's coming back off another injury, but he did. And when he was standing on the sideline before we got to halftime, I'm like, you know what? He must be okay. Yeah. As much pain as he's in, I'm not going to use the word injury, but he was so great in this game. And he scored. They scored every time they needed to score in the second half. He and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce, that was amazing.
You look at this team and you think about who was the number one outside receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy who coming into this season we thought would help this team in the slot. Or go back to the first half when Juju Smith-Schuster is the only outside wide receiver with the catch, and it was one catch for 5 yards. And so you're targeting Travis Kelce, you're working with Noah Gray, you're using Watson early on in the second half, and Patrick Mahomes wins the MVP of this game. He only threw for a little bit over 180 yards, but it was the manner in which he made the plays. It was the timing in which he made those plays that says, okay, Patrick Mahomes, again, shows us why it's so hard to pick against the Kansas City Chiefs. Because you're right, Wilbon, you're right, Stephen A. Coming into this game, the Philadelphia Eagles should have had the pass rush that could get to him. Right. But think about Andy Reid using tight ends to chip, always making sure before the running back got out to be the check down, he was hitting the defensive ends. There was so much that they did as a team where they out-schemed the Philadelphia Eagles, and along with out-scheming them, they out-executed them.
One of the things I was thinking about, Ryan, and I want to throw this by you because you're the Super Bowl champion up here on this podium. Let me ask you this. I'm looking at the Eagles yesterday, and as Kansas City is making their run, it harkened me back to what we lost sight of about the Philadelphia Eagles throughout most of the season. They were giving up points in the second half. They would run roughshod over you in the first half, but they would taper off, and teams were able to get back. Not that they would lose games, obviously, but they would make it. Games would be far more interesting than they needed to be because the Eagles had trouble closing the door. And then I thought about that, and then I was reminded of something that I brought up last week that everybody was like, "Come on!" I said in the playoffs they went against the New York Giants. I called it Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and a bag of chips.
So disrespectful.
That's what I called it, right? Then they go up against the San Francisco 49ers. We've never seen a team lose 4 quarterbacks in the same season. Yeah. 2 of those quarterbacks, obviously, in Brock Purdy and Josh Johnson in the same game, in an NFC Championship game where they couldn't even throw the ball in the second half and everybody knew it. The Eagles never went through an offense like this all year long. And so for me, it was that's what came back to bite them. They couldn't prepare because they hadn't faced anything like they faced last night.
The thing is, you can't prepare for Patrick Mahomes. You can't prepare for that level of talent. And then when you look at Andy Reid, and they were so reactive to what the Philadelphia Eagles were doing, the way they set up those plays in the red zone, using Isaiah Pacheco because the run game was effective against the Philadelphia Eagles, and not abandoning it because you had Patrick Mahomes. I think everything that the Kansas City Chiefs did in the second half was not only a necessity, but it had to be done in exactly the way they did.
All right, so the referee crew was asked how much debate there was amongst the crew when that flag was thrown. Head official Carl Sheffer said there was no debate, just making sure that he had. And once he told us what he had, he went about our business. Dan Orlovsky joining us now from New York City. Dan, good morning. You got us?
What up? I got you.
Hey. Do you have a problem with that holding call, Dan?
I do. I do. The reality is 57 minutes plus in that football game, there wasn't a single holding penalty thrown. There was one pass interference flag that was thrown, not a single holding penalty. So the theme of the game is in many ways like referees are allowing those guys to play. And when I watch that play, two things that stand out to me are that's the play that we're throwing a holding penalty on. Is there a tug and a hold? Of course there is. And everybody, I've heard defensive players say millions of times there is on every single play. Great. So that's the one. This is the one that stands out. And the most, I guess, standout thing to me is body language post-play. Juju Smith-Schuster never intimates to the officials, what are we looking at? And like 3rd and 8, he's the guy running the winning route, and he is the guy that can feel a hold or a tug better than anybody can see it. And he doesn't have any type of body language towards the officials of going, where's the flag? How did you miss that? That's such a missed call. And so the reality of me watching that, and I was at the game, and I'm watching their sideline for Kansas City, and I'm watching Juju, and there's nothing like them going on, throwing arms up in the air and disappointment of you missed a call. And the fact that they went that long in the game without throwing a penalty when it comes to holding, and that's the one that we're going to throw the flag on, I think it's a bad call. 16 hours after the game, I still think it's a bad call. Even Bradbury admitting he did hold, yes. I still think it's a bad call because of what it was leading into that moment, and then watching the wide receivers' body language or lack thereof after it. I think it's a bad call. Bad call.
Dan, they already threw the flag though. Like the bench doesn't have to react in any way because they're looking at the yellow laundry on the field. They can see it.
What about Juju?
Like Juju. So now what you're saying is we are measuring how egregious a hold is based off the level of whining that goes along with the call. We talked about this earlier, Dan. You mentioned the call early on in the game on the slant where he looked like he tugged him a little bit before he wrapped around with the front hand to try to knock the ball down. That's at the point of attack. That's Juju thinking, I'm about to catch the ball. I'm emotional because I felt like I got tugged right at that moment. He was held at the start of the route. Juju might not know the rule. Juju might have think he got clamped up. When you look at this play, you can't, and I'm sitting with like great basketball minds here. This is basically saying because you let calls go or because Michael Jordan or LeBron James or whoever it is trying to finish the game and they get hit on the elbow, we have to swallow our whistle right now because we'll give up 2 free throws. No, they're supposed to make that call because it's holding.
Let me ask you
That's
this, Ryan,
it.
too. He did it twice.
Yes.
And that's what, when I looked at it again, it's twice. By the way, it isn't egregious. Sometimes there's shades of gray. And part of me wishes, because of the way that game was going, that there hadn't been a call. But when you look at it,
I agree with that, though.
Twice. And so, Dan, I'm thinking if he doesn't come back and he spins him, and one of the things always I love listening to and talking to officials about things they're looking for in multiple sports, but in pro football, the guys always talk about in the NFL, spinning, moving him. He did move him. And so I'm thinking, oh, wow. They didn't get hosed, Dan. I hear what you're saying, by the way. You make great points. They didn't get hosed with the call. The call, do you swallow the whistle in that case? Do you do something that's right out in the open? And the flag was down. They were definitive about the call, at least. They didn't take their time. They weren't debating it in their minds. And I'm like, you know what? You got to let it go. Is it the worst thing in the world? They get hosed. Is it like a pass interference penalty not called in New Orleans? No, it wasn't like that.
No, right. Well, listen, let me say this. I get where Dan is coming from. I just don't think, respectfully, he's explaining it right. Let me break this down for y'all, because I think, especially you, Wilbon, you're going to appreciate where I'm going when we think about basketball and we think about officials like Joey Crawford, Steve Javie, and some of the great officials, Nick Pavetta, even though Nick Pavetta, as they used to joke and call him, and all of this other stuff in basketball and football, in basketball rather. But in football, I understand where you're coming from. The call was the right call. There's no disputing that. There was definitely holding. Ryan, we're not refuting that. Here's what I want y'all to think about for a second. Moments matter. Moments in sports history matter.
They do.
The theater of sports is what we pay to see. You are in a situation where you're driving downfield. If that call isn't called, Kansas City kicks a field goal. They go up 3 anyway. But instead of 8 seconds on the clock or 4 seconds on the clock, now
90.
you got under 2 minutes. Jalen Hurts is handed the ball, and Jalen Hurts at that moment has the ball with under 2 minutes left. After Patrick Mahomes, I don't even care about the timers. I know it matters, but I'm not saying that. It's under 2 minutes left. Not Patrick Mahomes. He gave you the lead, and now it's Jalen Hurts with the ball with under 2 minutes left, and you got to go downfield. You can tie it, you can win it with a touchdown, or you can lose because you just don't get it done. It's the Super Bowl. And what I'm saying to you is that even though today, in this day and age where we see such strident, such a level of focus on getting the call right and depersonalizing everything, the reality of the situation is that when you're talking about the Super Bowl, with a game like that, tied 35-35 at that particular moment, what I wanted to see was that. I wanted to see Kansas City take the lead, and I wanted to see Jalen Hurts have the football. And I understand you're saying, again, the call was the right call, but there are many times throughout sports history where the right call gets missed or the wrong call gets made. It's happened throughout sports. Many champions have been crowned as champions when that has happened. It would have been nice to see that yesterday.
Listen, Arian Foster.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.